Hello everyone, you have come to Tata Comic Preview channel. Let read together. Have fun. Yunxiao's face was cold as he said resolutely, losing the soul-devouring banner is worse than death. Yuan Gohan's eyes flashed with disappointment. Although this result was disappointing, it was not unexpected. He bitterly said, in this case, if we can't open this illusory formation, we can only wait for death. However, Yunxiao's expression eased a little, and he said with a pained look, but I can't just wait for death like this. As a 9th-tier alchemist of the Holy Region, if you can compensate me a little, I'm willing to offer you the soul-devouring banner. After all, I can still clearly distinguish which is more important and which is less important. Yuan Gaohan was stunned for a moment before he immediately rejoiced, as long as we can take out the soul-devouring banner, we can escape from here. Just tell us what you want. Really? Yunxiao looked at him and asked. Just as Yuan Gaohan was about to agree, he suddenly remembered that this person in front of him didn't seem to be so simple and immediately stopped his impulse, frowning, tell me what you want first. Yunxiao put on a pure smile and said, losing the soul-devouring flag is almost impossible to make up for my loss, especially when it's a golden soul slave. You should be clear about the relationship between the two. So any compensation to me is like a cup of water in a burning cart, right? Yuan Gaohan frowned and nodded slightly, apparently agreeing with his statement. And Yunxiao took a deep breath and sighed. And even though we haven't known each other for long, you have some misunderstandings about me. Even if I escape from here, I don't dare to go to the Holy Region with you to ask for compensation. If I don't, my losses might be even greater, don't you think so? Yuan Gaohan snorted coldly and said, what do you mean by misunderstanding? You're such a coward. Yunxiao waved his hand and interrupted him, all right. It's hard to clear up the misunderstanding in a few words. Anyway, that's the situation. I can't just take out the soul-devouring banner for nothing. How about this, you can exchange 100 or so ancient scriptures for it. An ancient scripture? 100 of them? Yuan Gaohan sucked in a breath of cold air, his expression changing greatly as he angrily said, what do you think that ancient scripture is? Do you think it's a street full of erotic novels? You can write a few hundred to 1,000 words. Oh, yeah, how much do you want? Yunxiao wiped his nose and said in embarrassment, I've even offered my golden soul slave. You're just explaining a few scriptures, so you won't lose anything. Think about who's at a disadvantage and who's at a disadvantage. Otherwise, forget it. When your 8th tier starlight soul body dissipates, can your true body return to the 9th tier with a few ancient characters? Can you still stabilize your peak? Yuan Gohan's face darkened instantly. Yunxiao's words had hit his soft spot. The other party was just a small fry of the Soul Devourer clan. His death was not a big deal. But he was different. He was a 9th tier alchemist of the Holy Realm, so how could he die so easily? Yuan Gohan's face alternated between green and white as he was in a state of extreme conflict. He could not give up his 8th tier starlight soul body no matter what. Otherwise, his cultivation base would fall back to the 8th tier alchemist forever, which was unacceptable. However, leaking the profound meaning of the ancient scriptures was also a great crime. If it was discovered by the sanctuary, even he would not be able to bear the responsibility. Yunxiao's heart jolted, as if he had guessed the man's difficulties. Could it be that there's a rustling above? Yuan Gohan's eyes were filled with fear, his heart was extremely heavy, he gritted his teeth and said, state your other conditions. I can agree to anything else. Even if it's a 9th grade profound artifact, it can still be used. He suddenly stopped talking as he saw Yunxiao take out a small bell and play with it in his hand. With his eyes, he could naturally tell that it was a 9th tier mystic artifact, and not an ordinary one. This bell Pishio. Yuan Gohan's mouth was wide open, and his eyes were shining. Yunxiao casually put it away and said, what bell? Let's continue to discuss the conditions, why did you mention the 9th tier profound armament earlier? Yuan Gohan's throat was dry and thirsty, he shook his head and said dejectedly, there's no awkwardness. He was silent for a while before finally making up his mind. I can teach you the profound meaning of a word, but you have to swear that you can't teach it to anyone else. Only one. A layer of anger appeared on Yunxiao's face as he snorted and said, I've even given you my golden soul slave, and you're telling me an ancient scripture? Do you still have any shame? I don't want to live without my soul slave anyway. Let's all die together. Yuan Gaohan was stunned speechless. In his opinion, revealing the profound meaning of an ancient scripture was already a major crime, but the other party didn't care. But thinking about it, his words made sense. If a member of the Soul Devourer race lost his soul slave, it wouldn't be much different from him falling to the Eighth Order. Then, those two woo-woo. Yuan Gaohan mustered his courage and stretched out 2 fingers, his arm trembling. 20. Yunxiao blurted out with a determined look on his face, not a single one less. 20. Yuan Gaohan's eyes almost popped out as he roared, I don't even know 20, you're too much. What do you think this is? The scriptures passed down from the ancient times all contain rules. If you can study 1 or 2 of them in your life, you'll benefit greatly. Then how many do you know? Yunxiao asked coldly. Yuan Gaohan was furious and snorted, it's none of your business how many I know. No more than 3, or we'll die together. He was so angry that his body was smoking, and his soul flickered unsteadily as it was being consumed. Yunxiao could tell that he was almost at his limit, so he said awkwardly, all right, 3 it is. If I wasn't forced into a dead end, I wouldn't have agreed to your request. He currently only had a total of 7, and with these 3, he only had 10. However, his understanding of these scriptures should be able to reach new heights. Yuan Gaohan himself had only mastered 4.5, and the 5th one was still a blur. If he knew that Yunxiao had already mastered 7, he would probably burst into a fit of rage and kill. Give me a soul slave first. As if he was afraid that Yunxiao would go back on his words, Yuan Gaohan insisted on getting the soul slave first, and his attitude was extremely firm, unwilling to take a step back. Yunxiao was not afraid that he would go back on his word, so he gave him the soul-devouring banner and said, if I lose my soul slave, I won't be able to cultivate this type of cultivation technique in the future. This soul-devouring banner is useless, so I'll give it to you. Humph, a ghost wants your soul-devouring banner. Yuan Gaohan took it and examined it with his divine sense. It was indeed a golden soul slave, and it was full of soul power, very good. Only then did he relax. When he saw Yunxiao's calm look, he felt a little strange and could not help but ask, how do you plan to cultivate after losing the soul-devouring flag? Was he going to cultivate the soul fusion technique? That should be the best choice. None of your business. Yunxiao said impatiently. It's none of your business. Take the things and teach me 3 ancient scriptures. Yuan Gaohan nodded slightly, he was also a man of his word. He carefully put away the soul-devouring banner, his face revealing a helpless expression, and after a few long sighs, he began to explain. The origin of the ancient scriptures can't be investigated anymore. Because they're shaped like tadpoles and flash with golden light when they emit rule force, they're also called tadpole golden texts in many places. The number of scriptures that exist is very limited, and very few people have the ability to study them. Yunxiao also knew this basic knowledge, but he did not interrupt him this time. Instead, he let him continue. Yuan Gaohan continued, in fact, the Holy Region and the Sea of Soul Formation have long since begun to do statistics and research on these characters. But it was a pity that even if some alchemists could master some of these words, there was no good way to pass them on. In other words, these words could not exist in this world. Thus, even saints and soul formation cultivators don't have many who truly control it. Suddenly, Yunxiao asked, how many of these characters are there in total? Do you have the statistics? Yuan Gaohan frowned and thought for a while before saying, there might be thousands of them. Over 1,000. Yunxiao was so startled that he almost jumped up. How can there be so many? The power of rules contained in these characters was very powerful, and it was already a great benefit to learn a few of them. If he could master thousands of them, then he would have a huge headache. He didn't even dare to imagine. Yuan Gaohan also smiled bitterly, seeing through his thoughts and shaking his head, don't even think about it. These things shouldn't exist in this world. They're not things that ordinary people like us can peep at. Yunxiao remained silent. The scriptures he had learned added up to a few hundred words, and many of them were repeated. It seemed that there should be a large number of other Shin techniques in this world. He didn't know if he would be able to understand them completely in this life. Yuan Gaohan composed himself and said, I'm going to teach you 3 ancient scriptures. Watch carefully. I'll only explain the essence once and demonstrate it once. I said I'll teach you, but I didn't guarantee that I'll definitely teach you. With your aptitude, it's very likely that you'll never be able to master it in your lifetime. When he said that, he was taken aback. At the thought of Yunxiao's talent and aptitude, he could not believe what he had just said. Yunxiao did not answer. Instead, he raised his mind to the highest state and began to listen to Yuan Gaohan's explanation. This was the first time he had heard someone teach him something like this. In the past, he had always comprehended it on his own, so there was still a certain difference between the two. Yuan Gaohan had read a lot of information about his predecessors in the Holy Region, so he had great advantages and insights in all aspects. Yunxiao was delighted to hear this, and he kept asking all kinds of questions, which made Yuan Gaohan both stunned and shocked. Many questions that even Yuan Gaohan himself had not thought of were raised by Yunxiao, and he fell into deep thought. He explained and listened, and from his single explanation at the beginning, it became a discussion between the two of them. Yuan Gaohan was also shocked at the beginning, but he slowly got used to it, and studied each other like 2 old friends, both of them benefiting greatly. His initial half-understanding of the 5 sutras had also been greatly inspired by the constant dialogue, becoming clear. Yunxiao's gains were even greater. The 3 characters seemed to be very common, and they had appeared in several divine arts he had seen before. Immediately, his understanding of these divine arts deepened, and all kinds of doubts he had were cleared up, and his mind gradually became clear. Although it was only 3 words, the research derived from it was endless. The 2 of them sat in the yellow sand, immersed in their own thoughts, talking and comprehending. Finally, after completely understanding the 3 words of the scripture, Yuan Gaohan was not willing to say anything more, even though he had also obtained great benefits. However, when he thought about how he had recklessly imparted the profound meaning of the ancient scriptures, he was still filled with fear. Yunxiao only gave up when he found that he could not dig out anything. He sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. After an unknown amount of time, he finally understood everything he had learned. Yuan Gaohan was secretly shocked, especially the look of enlightenment on Yunxiao's face, which terrified him. It had taken him more than 10 years to learn these 3 characters. He suppressed the fear in his heart and said, Young man, I don't know your name. But are you willing to join the sanctuary? I can guarantee that, as long as you're willing, the resources you'll get will only be several times, dozens of times, or even hundreds of times better than the Soul Devourer race. Such a monstrous talent, he had the intention to rope him in, even at all costs. Otherwise, this young man would be too terrifying. Perhaps in a few decades, the entire realm of heavenly martial arts would have to bow down to him. Yunxiao smiled, feeling very satisfied. Let's get out of this damn place first. If we can't get out, everything will be in vain. Yuan Gaohan didn't know if he was being perfunctory or what, but he continued, besides, your soul-devouring banner will be destroyed soon, so you won't be able to cultivate it to the highest level even if you stay in the soul-devouring clan. As long as you follow me to the Saint Domain, there will definitely be cultivation techniques that are much stronger than soul battle techniques for you to choose from. Yes, I'll seriously consider it. Old Yuan, let's start breaking the formation. Yunxiao urged, with no look of consideration on his face. Yuan Gaohan sighed slightly. If such a talent couldn't be used by the Holy Region, then they couldn't become enemies either. Even at the critical moment, directly wiping him out was a necessary method. Although the sanctuary ruled the world on the surface, they did all kinds of shady business in the dark. I hope you'll consider it, he said regretfully. After saying that, Yuan Gaohan took out the soul-devouring banner and his right hand's fingers constantly changed, sending runes into it. Very quickly, the soul-devouring flag began to glow brightly. He let out a loud shout and flew into the air, fluttering in the wind. Yunxiao's pupils constricted slightly. What Yuan Gaohan had just used was the method of using the soul-devouring banner. It seemed that he had also studied the techniques of the soul-devouring clan. The soul-devouring flag waved in the air, and golden light shot out like the sun, bringing some light to the dark world, warming one's heart. A golden soul slowly stretched out inside, and its expression became somewhat dull as it looked around in a daze. What's going on? Yuan Gaohan frowned. This gold soul slave doesn't seem to have any intelligence? Yunxiao knew that it was because Zhang Xiaotian was dead, and the soul slave had lost its master, which led to the loss of intelligence. I used a secret technique to advance to the golden color. Otherwise, do you think I could have refined a rank 9 golden soul slave with my strength as a 4-stars martial grandmaster? Yuan Gaohan thought for a moment and felt that it was true. In the beginning, he had been curious. The other party was only a 4-star martial grandmaster, so how could he have a 9th rank soul-devouring banner? It didn't seem to be very powerful. He began to feel a little regretful for being threatened by the other party and getting so many precious things out of him. However, now was not the time to think about these things. He shouted and made a strange seal with his hand. A golden tadpole-like character appeared in his palm. He grabbed at the golden soul slave. The golden tadpole-like characters were one of the 3 that he had just taught Yunxiao. They represented an extremely strong power of rules, and Yuan Gaohan could use them with great ease. Clearly, he was very familiar with them. The seal entered the soul slave's body, and the golden light instantly melted and spread through his body, turning the faint golden color into a rich gold. The soul slave immediately screamed in pain. The sound was like a crow's bones being crushed. It made people's hair stand on end and they had goosebumps all over. Yunxiao's eyes were filled with confusion. He did not know what Yuan Gaohan wanted to do, but he did not look like a pervert who liked to abuse people. You must be very curious about what I want to do, right? Yuan Gaohan looked smug. He suddenly found that he had a great sense of achievement for being able to make Yunxiao unable to see through his behavior. I'm going to completely obliterate this soul slave and refine it in reverse, turning it into the most primitive soul power. Yunxiao was taken aback. Reverse refining? Could it be that the Lord is making? Yuan Gaohan's body shivered, and his eyes burst out with light as he shouted, "Shut up. That Lord's name isn't something you can just call out. Since you even know about that Lord, you can't be Han Yinshan's biological son, right?" He suddenly felt regret for being so proud that he forgot himself. He closed his mouth and didn't dare to say anything more. If he revealed that Lord's situation, it would really be a great sin that could not be absolved with 10,000 deaths. Bang! Suddenly, Yuan Gaohan felt a sharp pain in his head. He gave a loud cry and looked at Yunxiao angrily as he roared, "What are you doing? You sneaked an attack on me? You are Han Yinshan's son." Yunxiao said coldly. "Your whole family is Han Yinshan's son. You coward." Yuan Gaohan was speechless for a moment before angrily saying, "Anyway, don't talk to me anymore. Don't disturb me while I'm casting my spell." After he finished speaking, he focused his mind and body on casting the spell, not daring to be distracted at all. Yunxiao's face was filled with uncertainty. Sure enough, he did not speak again, but his eyes were much more serious. The so-called reverse refining was a kind of reverse behavior that reversed the alchemy process. It had always been a difficult problem for the alchemy world. For example, you could refine 18 materials into a sword, but you couldn't return the sword to its original form. That was why the alchemy world had always believed that the process of alchemy was irreversible. However, in the long river of history, there had never been a lack of peerless geniuses. There were still many alchemists who were very interested in reverse refining, and they had accumulated a lot of information over the long years. Although reverse refining had not been fully realized so far, it had played an indelible role in the development of alchemy, and many strange techniques and secret arts had been created. What Yuan Gaohan was doing now was one of them, and he had directly integrated the ancient golden characters into the spell. It could be seen that his achievements in this field were not shallow. The golden soul slave in the air wailed in pain for a long time before its voice gradually weakened. A faint golden light spread out in the soul-devouring banner, and the soul slave slowly lost its form, melting into a mass of pure energy. Yunxiao felt a faint chill in his heart as he watched. Since this reverse refining technique could refine soul slaves back, what about the souls of ordinary people? Could it also be directly refined into a mass of energy? If he could, then what was the difference between the soul-nurturing pills of the soul-devourer race? After refining the soul, they would absorb the power within. When Yuan Gaohan saw the ball of energy, his eyes shone with a strange light. This energy is too impure and not pure. It's not suitable for absorption. However, he couldn't care about that now. He would just make do with it for now. With this ball of energy, I should be able to temporarily break through to the ninefold soul body and break the seal. He shouted, jumped up from the ground, and rushed up. The soul slave that had completely turned into a ball of energy flew towards him, and the two immediately fused together. Yuan Gohan's body was wrapped in a faint golden energy that constantly flowed, like a coat condensed from a water membrane, covering the surface of his body. Go further away and watch me break the restrictions here. Feeling a large amount of soul power being replenished, Yuan Gaohan suddenly let out a heroic roar. After laughing loudly, he flew into the air and saw a golden light shoot into the sky like fireworks. Immediately after, a huge golden light condensed into a palm print above him, paused for half a second, and then began to whistle down. There was nothing fancy about the palm technique, but it was the most common hollow palm among alchemists. It was different from the palm force condensed by martial artists' vital qi. This kind of hollow palm was completely condensed by mental power. Using mental power to compress and distort space, thereby producing powerful destruction, this palm force itself was not destructive. Many alchemists were not strong, so they liked to use this simple way of attack. Yunxiao also felt the surrounding space begin to shrink toward the center under the huge golden palm print. A powerful spatial force pressed down on him, and his body glowed with a faint yellow light as he retreated. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the yellow sand that filled the sky was squeezed into the center of the palm print. Everything in the surroundings looked like a mirror, constantly changing shape. All the space quickly disappeared under the palm, and the surrounding scenery changed. As the space trembled, 7 huge stone pillars rose from where the two of them were standing and continued to grow. There were all sorts of patterns carved on the stone pillars, and huge chains connected the 7 pillars together from head to tail. As they rose, they made clanging sounds. The two of them were frightened by this change and retreated. What made their eyes widen even more was that in the middle of the 7 huge stone pillars, there was a tall tower that rose straight into the sky. The 7 stone pillars were huge enough, but in front of the tower, they were just guardrails. This change happened in just a few breaths, leaving the two completely dumbfounded. Yunxiao and Yuan Gaohan could be considered as experienced and knowledgeable people, but at this moment, the tower and stone pillars still gave them an extremely shocking and magnificent feeling, so much so that they could not even look at them directly. The two of them were stunned for a while before they slowly came back to their senses. Yuan Gaohan was the first to swallow a mouthful of saliva before saying with difficulty, "What is this? The aura it's emitting is too evil, it makes one's hair stand on end." Yunxiao was better off, as he had experienced far more than Yuan Gaohan. After the shock, he quickly calmed down and flew around the giant tower, then returned to where he was. This illusionary realm and even this space might exist to seal this ancient pagoda. Yuan Gaohan was very shocked and said in horror, "The artifact aura emanating from this ancient pagoda seems to be at the peak of the 9th rank. Not only this ancient pagoda, but even these 7 pillars also have a 9th tier tool rhythm. Moreover, they are connected from head to tail to form a formation. Evil qi is surging inside, and one will shiver all over when one approaches it a little." Yunxiao's face grew even more solemn. He had discovered that wisps of energy were swirling around the ancient tower, and they were growing stronger and stronger. It was none other than the black demonic energy. Gulp. Yunxiao swallowed and said solemnly, "We might have gotten into big trouble. Let's hurry and see if there's any way out of this place. If I'm not wrong, there must be a very powerful figure being suppressed in this ancient tower. And look at this demonic qi, it's getting more and more, it seems to be accumulating power." Demonic qi? Yuan Gohan's heart jolted as he stared at the black energy in horror, his face even uglier than Yunxiao's. It's really demonic qi. How is this possible? How can there be demonic qi in the heavenly martial realm? You know something? Yunxiao asked. Yuan Gaohan turned around and glanced at him, bitterly saying, "What else do you know? Demons are a powerful race in ancient times, and they've been annihilated with the passage of time, just like those true spirits. Now, there's no true spirit at all, so don't tell me I'm going to see a demon today. Didn't we see the true spirit crocodile earlier?" Yunxiao asked. Yuan Gaohan asked, could it be that this demon was also created by them? In the past, the experts here not only wanted to create true spirits, but also demons? He felt that this idea was extremely absurd, but what he saw in front of him proved something. It's possible to create that crocodile, Yunxiao said. But this demon is definitely not one. He must have been suppressed here by the experts of this place. Just as you said, not only the ancient pagoda, even the 7 pillars are 9th-tier profound armaments. Yunxiao stepped forward and carefully examined the patterns on the pillar. Some parts were damaged, revealing the silver color inside, which seemed to be some kind of metal. He stared at the silver-white light and pondered, as if he wanted to confirm something. He reached out and touched it. A bone-chilling feeling immediately spread through his body, as if his soul was about to be frozen.